migrants attempting the perilous journey. The Immigration Minister, Chris Philp, has pledged to work with French authorities to agree stronger measures on interceptions and returns. The Commons Home Affairs Committee is to hold an inquiry into the reasons behind the illegal crossings. The inquiry will consider the role of criminal gangs.
President Trump has signed an executive order banning any U.S. transactions with the parent companies of two big Chinese social media apps. The restrictions on ByteDance, owner of the video-sharing app TikTok, and Tencent, which owns the messaging service WeChat, come into force in 45 days' time. Our North America correspondent David Willis reports.
The executive orders maintain that TikTok and WeChat constitute a threat both to the economy and the national security of the United States, and accuse the owners of collecting personal information which could be used either for corporate espionage or blackmail purposes, or to track the location of U.S. government workers or contractors. The U.S. computer giant Microsoft has expressed interest in acquiring TikTok's business here, and Microsoft now has 45 days in which to complete the purchase. In an unprecedented move, President Trump has made approving the sale to Microsoft conditional on part of the proceeds going to the U.S. government in return for his making the deal possible.
8 Aberdeen footballers are self-isolating after 2 squad members tested positive for COVID-19. The group is said to have visited an Aberdeen bar, which has been linked to the city's spike in coronavirus cases. They will miss 3 Scottish Premier League matches.
Thanks very much indeed. The time now is 7 minutes past 6. That means we can find out about the day's weather from Stav Danaeus, who's at the BBC Weather Centre. Morning, Stav.
Good morning to you, Martha. Thank you very much. And good morning to you at home. Well, it's going to be very hot today. I think today's looking at being the peak of the heat. In fact, although it's going to be warm and sunny into the weekend, we'll start to see wind change direction a little bit to come in more from a north-northeast direction. So that will just knock the edge off the temperatures somewhat, although it'll still be very warm or even hot. But today we're seeing a warm, quite thundery plume move up from the near continent. Although most places will be dry today across England and Wales, there is a risk that the humidity and the heat could set off an isolated shower or thunderstorm later on in the day. But generally for England and Wales, dry, sunny and hot today, as temperatures generally in the mid to high 20s widely, and the mid to low 30s for the Midlands southwards. We could see 36 Celsius or so in the London area this afternoon. It's not dry everywhere. We've got a weather front out the west of the UK that's going to push into Northern Ireland, western Scotland. It's going to bring more cloud here, more of a breeze, outbreaks of rain. Some of the rain could turn out to be thundery in places, but it'll tend to clear away later on. But it'll obviously temper the values here with temperatures in the low 20s Celsius. Now across the board tonight it's going to be very warm and muggy. Temperatures no lower than 15 to maybe 20 Celsius across the southeast. Into tomorrow then, the start of the weekend looks to be dry, sunny and hot for much of the country, and it's going to be hot again across the south, but maybe not quite as hot as what we'll see today.
Hot, thank you very much indeed, Stav. Let's look at 8 minutes past 6 at the front pages, which reflect that weather, but also nervousness about people's holiday plans. The Times leads with this headline: Britons on their way to France risk quarantine. Now, France was not on the list of new countries that you need to quarantine on return from. That was Belgium, Andorra and Bahamas, announced last night. But what the paper is pointing out is that France's 7-day rolling average for cases hit 18.8 per 100,000 yesterday, which is heading towards the sort of number that led to Spain being put on the quarantine list. Another reason for nervousness this summer is exams, of course, and the fact that many pupils are waiting to get their A-levels and GCSEs, but not their normal grades, the ones that have been effectively calculated by computer. The Telegraph leads with the story: exam U-turn as pupils win reprieve over appeals. Whole year groups will now be able to appeal against the grades that they are given.
And the main story in The Guardian: NHS shutdown risks thousands of deaths in COVID-19 second wave. They've spoken to a number of doctors and surgeons leaders who are saying that the NHS will be inflicting pain, misery and risk of death on tens of thousands of patients if it again shuts down normal care when a second wave of COVID-19 hits. They're saying they can't have a situation in which patients are unable to access diagnostic tests, clinic appointments and treatments which they urgently need.
And if you remember, which of course you do, Mr Cummings' trip to the northeast, the Daily Mirror that broke that story along with The Guardian, is back for more with what it calls a virus exclusive. watchdog is called on to probe Cummings' second lockdown trip. Now, the paper did allege that there was a second lockdown trip. Mr. Cummings, Prime Minister's key aide, of course, denied it at the time, and now the Mirror is reporting that the couple, who say they are certain they saw him, have complained to the police watchdog that their complaint was not properly probed.
And what's the most attractive accent in the world? I think, Nick, you'll say Cheshire, but actually it's the Edinburgh accent has been voted the most attractive in the world. That's thanks to the Bond effect, courtesy of Sir Sean Connery. The time now is 11 minutes past 6. Residential summer camps for children aren't open this summer over worries about COVID-19, but given that these activities can make a difference to children's lives, some providers are arguing that they should be allowed, as Sancha Berg reports.
Raising sails on one of the tall ship's yachts docked at Portsmouth Harbour. In normal times, they would be out at sea, crewed by youth workers and vulnerable teenagers who eat and sleep on board. But those trips are banned thanks to coronavirus. Disappointing for head teachers like Emma Bradshaw, who leads a pupil referral unit in South London. She was planning to send students there this summer.
The difference it makes is massive. It takes them out of their comfort zone. It takes them into learning new skills and activities. It develops a different perspective on the world.
That's echoed by one of her pupils who sailed last year.
I've got more confident and I've learnt how to manage with teamwork and stuff, because I don't usually do that.
This year, Emma Bradshaw says the trip would be especially welcome. Many of her pupils' families have been under intense pressure thanks to lockdown.
A lot of them are struggling. Parents maybe that have been working in the gig economy whose resources suddenly dried up. So we've been delivering food parcels, cooped up in a small, often house or flat with no garden, and domestic violence is in the background somewhere.
Richard Lehman, CEO of the Tall Ships Youth Trust, is worried what will happen to the young people if they spend the whole summer at home.
All the youth groups tell us the young people who we should be taking out are increasingly frustrated, and that will lead to social problems, whether it's mental health challenges, whether it's crime, knife crime. So this is a cauldron that's bubbling away.
His ships are ready to go. There are hand sanitizer dispensers on board. COVID testing's been arranged. Richard Lehman argues many of these teenagers have been mixing with others at school throughout the pandemic, so setting a precedent. And he's even tried to get Boris Johnson to intervene.
I managed to get a note to the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago by hand. I've also written to him formally. We've laid out the case, the precedent being set, the Merchant Navy and Royal Navy parallels for creating bubbles at sea, and the contention that this group of vulnerable youngsters really do need to get out.
He's asking for guidance to be revised for this group, but the Department for Education said it won't change. They told us, in line with Public Health England's guidelines, our advice for educational settings is not to organise residential trips, both domestic and international, for children under 18 at this time. They said charities could organise day trips for young people, so long as they adhere to social distancing guidance.
That was Sancha Berg reporting. It's now 13 minutes past 6. The cinema chain View will start reopening some of its screens from today, more than 4 months after they shut because of the pandemic. Rob Young has more on that and the rest of the day's business news. Morning, Rob.
Yes, good morning to you. Yeah, View is reopening 10 of its 90 UK multiplexes today. We'll speak to the company's boss in a moment. We'll also look at the job cuts of British Airways, as cabin crew expect to hear today if they'll be made redundant. We'll also hear from some workers who've recently been holding a protest against the plans by BA to make many thousands of staff redundant. They will find out today whether they will lose their jobs. Other workers at the airline could be offered new jobs on different, unions say, inferior terms with lower pay. BA's owner IAG announced in April it would cut up to 12,000 jobs due to the pandemic. Well, many workers have reacted furiously, holding protests and taking aim at the BA boss Alex Cruz and the IAG head Willie Walsh.
We are BA! We are BA! We are BA!
me, I'm going to go and make a cup of tea. Where isn't it going?
Our livelihood's gone after many, many years' flight. Once we've turned the corner, it's about profit making for Willie Walsh, Alex Cruz, and whoever comes in behind them. It's about shareholders and the money that goes to them, not the workers that have been loyal for many years.
We had an email telling everybody that we weren't to bully and harass our colleagues. Yet that's exactly what this company are doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I love British Airways. I've given my entire life to BA. It's not British Airways that are at fault, it's the management of BA and IAG that is doing this to us.
Willie, Willie, Willie! Willie, Willie, Willie!
The Unite Union has threatened strike action. British Airways has said that it has to adapt to survive and will keep inviting union reps to discuss its proposals. We can speak to Meryl April, an employment lawyer and partner at the firm C.M. Murray. Morning, Meryl.
Morning.
So the unions say that BA plans to fire and rehire staff on new terms and conditions. As far as you know, is that what is happening, and is that allowed?
Yes, my understanding is that is exactly what is happening, and yes, it is allowed.
Even with a 20% pay cut, as could be the case for many BA cabin crew?
Yes, the law says that if an employer has a sound business reason to introduce changes to employees' terms and conditions, and they try to agree that and are unable to, then the employer is able to force through that change by dismissing the employees on their current terms and offering to re-engage them on new terms, which could be less favourable.
And if that employee doesn't agree to move to the contract, what can they do about it? Are they entitled to any kind of compensation?
As I understand it, the BA employees are being offered voluntary redundancy, but if they prefer to stay, they need to apply for a new job and be mapped to a role. If that doesn't happen, they would be made redundant and paid notice pay and redundancy.
Right.